As you can see, the temperature currently reads 69 degrees. And I am inside the van. Just woke up to my first cool night out here since I've been back in the van. I think the temperature outside dropped down to like 59 degrees. 58, 59 degrees outside. It's about 10 degrees warmer inside the van. And I actually have my sleeping bag out. I had to get it out last night because it got cold. When I got in the van last night to go to sleep, I think it was like 78 degrees inside the van. And the temperature dropped like 10 degrees overnight. And it got cold, and I had to get the sleeping bag, which I'm using as a cover. You know, I have it opened up. So I'm using this as a cover to stay nice and warm. A tip for you. If you know that it's going to get cold, get your blankets and stuff ready before you go to sleep. Don't leave it underneath, like, you know, all this stuff was stored underneath the bed. So it was like the middle of the night, and I woke up shivering, and I was like, dang, it is cold in here. So I had to get this out, and because it was stored under the bed, I had to, like, kind of do some contortion to get the, flip the wooden board under here over while I was still in the van, because I didn't want to open the door and get out and do that in the middle of the night, and get the sleeping bag out in the dark and contorted and stuff. It was complicated. And then you get those muscle spasms where because you're trying to move too fast or whatever, and I had this muscle spasm, and I was like stuck. You know how it hurts, and then you gotta like try not to move. That's what happened last night. So it was the first night that I've had since I've been back in the van where I didn't have to. Things are out of focus here. First night back since I didn't have to turn the fan on. I have all 3 fans still hooked up and working, and I didn't have to turn them on, so it was really nice to be able to sleep without having to have the fan on. And it was cold. Not cold, but cool. I could take more days like this, because this is actually very comfortable. And when you wake up and you're like all snug inside this blanket, you know, it's extremely nice. Anyhow, even though it's Sunday, I have to work today. Work-wise, Walmart has actually increased my hours. They've been trying to work with me to try to give me more time, and I've let them know I need to try to make full time on there. So I think the assistant manager, he's pushing to try to get me full time status. Meanwhile, though, I've been working pretty much every day almost. Like this week, I'm working 8 days straight with no days off. At least 8 hours per day, sometimes as much as 11 hours in one day. So I went all the way from being down to 4 hours a week to upwards of 45, 50 hours per week at Walmart, which is, to me, it's acceptable. Even though I'm working all this time, I'm still not making much due to everything being taken out. But at least it's, paying child support, and if I can just stay in this job and have some stability, it should help with resetting things. It's just going to take time. Still not earning enough because Walmart doesn't pay a lot, I mean, they're actually paying pretty decently now compared to some other jobs for base level jobs, but it's not enough for paying for a house, paying for even an apartment or anything like that. When you have, now, because I'm getting paid a little bit more, they're not taking the full 85%. It's dropping down more like 65% of my income has been taken away. So that's helping a little bit. It's giving me just a little bit of money to live off each month. versus just like pennies, which is, I think it's ridiculous. And somebody commented, it's like, there's something messed up with your country if you're working full-time or overtime, you're working 40, 50 hours a week at more than minimum wage or whatever, and you're not making it. You can't even afford to get a place to rent. That's the issue with Brevard County. The cost of housing here has gone way, way up. Like, to rent a 2-bedroom apartment now in this area is about $1,200 to $1,400 a month. That's rental. $1,200 to $1,400 a month. And if you do the math, you can't rent that, even if you're working full time. You can't afford it, Now, if you have to pay bills, like if you have insurance, car bills, anything else like that, you really can't afford it. And then, that they kind of force you to rent because you could afford actually a mortgage on a house potentially, but they won't let you get a loan to borrow money to get a house so you can pay a mortgage. They kind of force you into the situation where you have to pay for rent. The reason they do that is because they say, well, your income level's not high enough, because they only calculate like 20 to 30% is what you should be pulling to make your mortgage payment. And at my rate right now, with what gets deducted for child support and student loans and everything, I have to be making about $40, $30 to $40 an hour to be able to afford anything, and I'm not anywhere near that. So that's the current situation. I'm no longer calling in to go to work at the Space Coast Stadium because Walmart has me pretty much full-time or more. I've been getting a bit of overtime, but it can change. The reason I'm getting so many hours is, as you know, it is retail, and we're getting ready to hit Halloween, and then, of course, Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and then New Year's, and then right after that, I think it's going to slow back down again. So right now, I am getting hours. I'm grateful for the hours. The way to get the hours actually was difficult. They still aren't scheduling me full-time at the position that I was hired in. I had to cross-train for a second job at Walmart. So I'm working several different departments. And the reason I'm doing that is so that they can keep me at least, between 32 to 40 hours per week scheduled. And right now they've been scheduling me at least 40. So I'm happy when they're scheduling me 40. I just hope that this is consistent. But, the longtime employees kind of warned me that this is Walmart. They'll do this when they need you. But then when the season slows down, you can be back down to 4 hours a week again. So, because I'm still classified as part-time. So trying to push for full-time. Because at full-time, I think at a minimum they have to schedule at least 34 hours a week. Full-time. So you get that guarantee of at least 34 hours a week. And the way they do full-time, part-time status is kind of interesting now at Walmart. Things have changed since I was here a long time ago, like 12 years ago. I worked at Walmart before. What they do now, they hire everyone as a part-timer. And then they say that if they schedule you for 12 consecutive weeks of at least 34 hours or more, then you automatically become full-time. So what they try to do is schedule you, and then before they hit 12 weeks, they cut down your hours so that you don't hit 34 hours or 30 or 40 hours a week, and then you lose your full-time status. That's one way for them to control their employee costs, is not giving people full-time. They say they have a certain ratio of part-time to full-time, and they're only allowed to hire a certain number of full-time versus part-timers. Now, the assistant manager said he's going to talk to the store manager and push for me to get full-time status, even though they haven't had me for 12 consecutive weeks of working full-time. Even though they've had me for at least, we're getting ready to hit the 12-week point right now, the 3-month period. And the last I would say probably the last 3 weeks, they've had 2 or 3 weeks, they've had me working at full-time and overtime hours. And I work hard, you know. So we'll see what happens. He says he's pushing for it, and he says if they can't give it to me, that's why. It's the numbers. But, you know, if I keep working full-time for at least 12 weeks, it'll be automatic. The system should automatically promote me to full-time. But then some of the people who were telling me they got full-time said, good luck with that, that I have to keep tabs on my paycheck, and if it doesn't happen, I have to call corporate and push for it, and it could take a long time, you know. So we'll see what happens. Just wanted to give you guys a quick update and let you know that things are actually much better in the van now that the temperature is cooler. The van is a mess. You can see my power system here. Everything is just kind of a mess right now. I need to straighten things out and clean out the van, and I'll do a proper tour and show you the inverter cooking system and everything else and how it's hooked up, and some tips on how to keep the battery from draining out while you're cooking. Because I just figured out what was causing my power to go out. Maybe I'll go ahead and tell you about it and I'll show you later. But essentially, when you're hooked up to the inverter for cooking, you want to hook it right up to the power that's being drawn from the vehicle battery, where it's pulling it right from the alternator. The reason for that is when the alternator is running, it generates more than enough electricity to run the inverter. If you go and you pull the power for the inverter off your house battery, it drains it very, very fast. You know, when you're doing something like pulling 300 watts for cooking, and then your battery dies. Even though you're charging it, it'll die because the alternator won't charge the house system fast enough. So what you've got to do is run the line. You know, and in my case, I use a line that hooks up to the switch up front for my inverter cooking system. I run it right back up here to this new inverter, not the new inverter, but the inverter back here now. And then I run the line from the inverter down to the house battery, not the vehicle house battery, but the house battery for the camping portion of it, to run the fans and other items. And that has been working like a charm now. That's how the system used to be hooked up, and when I got, you know, fancy and tried to run the power system through the battery before pulling it, I was killing my batteries. So this explains why the batteries were running out, and now the system seems to be working well again. You just want to make sure that when you do that, your house battery isn't already low, because I think it does pull a little bit of extra power from the house battery if the inverter doesn't produce, not the inverter, if the alternator doesn't generate enough electricity just to run the inverter for cooking. Anyhow, I'm going to let you guys go. I want to thank you all for tuning in. I hope everyone else out there is staying nice and warm and safe. Thinking of each of you, especially those of you who are up in the Great White North, the cold portions, in a cold area. It is starting to get cold. I guess I should start preparing my cold gear. Time to pull out the mucklucks. It's about 60, gonna be at about 65, 68 degrees today. You'll see people in Florida wearing mucklucks and winter coats with snoots and everything now. Until next time, everyone, take care. God bless you all.